First, discombobulate. Dazed, discombobulate. Distract target. Discombobulate.
Hello, hello. In this video, I'm going to talk about Asuka's power plays. In my baby's first Asuka guide, I mentioned right out of the gate that an easy way to grasp the Asuka mindset in Tekken 8 is to understand that every decision you make ultimately leads back into a power mix-up, or a 50-50. All roads with Asuka lead back to slamming someone's feet with down 1+2. And knowing that this is your objective is a fantastic way to begin to learn how Asuka ticks in this game. Basically, Asuka has a difficult time dealing damage against patient players because her small Tekken is very limited. In the event that you're having a hard time finding a launch or a counter hit, Asuka doesn't have quick pokes or tricky mix-ups to whittle down the other player's HP with. Instead, as an Asuka player, a lot of your game plan centers around using her strings and frame traps to cause the other player to hesitate in their attack. When the other player isn't pressing buttons, this gives you a large opportunity to close the distance and do something like apply a nasty power mix-up for big damage. You have other options than just a power mix-up though. There are at least a couple of distinct approaches you can take when you have the other player's hesitation, and I would generalize these as power plays. The main two being the power mix-up and the wall push. I would also consider key charge strats to be in the same vein as a power play, because you would apply it in the same situation, but it's a bit experimental. In any case, let's break down these power plays. I have a little format for this video that'll hopefully help you pick up what I'm putting down. I'm going to start off with the ground level basics and then expand on them with a detailed breakdown of what your options are and what their implications are. Once I'm done breaking everything down, I'll cap off the section with a concise summary of the main points and some basic advice to help you start applying these power plays in matches. I want to try to make sure my Asuka theory videos are accessible to Asuka players at any skill level. And I hope that I'll be able to help you cut through the noise a bit and come away from the video with a small and easy to understand list of moves and ideas to work into your play. If this video is still too much for you, I recommend just going off of what I say about power mix-ups in my baby's first Asuka guide, which is linked in the description. It's a lightning quick read, I promise. First up is the power mix-up. A power mix is just a straight 50-50. You're forcing the other player to guess mid or low. It's super easy too. You just rung up and do 1+2 or down 1+2. The range of this mix-up is really short. You have to rung up to point blank for it to work reliably, but the reward is really big if you can manage to do that. 1+2 is a mid that launches on natural hit, and it's -9 on block, so it's totally safe. There aren't many launchers in this game that are like this. Asuka is very privileged to have a launcher like this. You'll be well off if you spam this all the time. The only drawback is that it's -9 on block and leaves you at point blank, so you're usually forced to play defense afterwards. Apart from being great as a mix-up tool, 1+2 is great as a sort of mid-check in general. If you time it well with your opponent's buttons and movements, it will not only launch the other player if they press buttons at the wrong time, but will also clip them if they fuzzy crouch or start a sidestep with the wrong timing. This is relevant to mention because this is something that forward 1 doesn't accomplish as well, which is an alternative power mig that I'll break down in just a moment. Down 1+2 is a knockdown low that generally guarantees forward 2 on hit for 36 damage total. I say generally because it's technically only guaranteed reliably at the wall or if it hits at point blank range, where forward 2 will connect all the time without requiring a dash. You can always do a dash forward 2 to help it connect consistently at any range after down 1+2, but the other player can avoid dash forward 2 with a side roll left, unless you're really quick about the dash forward too. Down 1+2 is launch punishable on block, so obviously you need to be clever with how you use it so that it's hard to read. You either want to be conditioning the other player often with your power mid, like 1+2, or mix up your timing well enough that it's difficult for the other player to tell when they should block low. There are some players out there who will try to react to down 1+2, which is possible thanks to its very snappy startup animation, but this is exceedingly difficult and unlikely for you to run into. Here's some bonus tech for down 1+2. If you want to gamble on maximizing damage, forward forward 3 will clip the other player for a bit of extra damage if they try to get off the ground after the knockdown. And forward 3+4 will hit for extra damage if they stay on the ground or side roll. 1+2 and down 1+2 are your basic power mid and power low respectively. If you want to enhance your power mix, you can try using forward forward 1 instead of 1+2 as your power mid. Forward forward 1 isn't a mid launcher, but it guarantees down back 1 and its extensions on hit, which makes forward forward 1 functionally a heat engager. If you confirm forward forward 1 on hit into down back 1 2, that's 50 damage and a heat engager for massive plus frames and HP regen. You can add on to this damage for free if you tack on a powerful attack after the heat engager, such as forward forward 1 as an easy option for 11 chip on block and 61 damage total, or Gusto while running 1+2 for a whopping 15 chip and 65 damage total. Just be aware that forward forward 1 and other non-running moves can still be vulnerable to parries and Yoshimitsu's flash and other stuff like that. In any case, this means forward forward 1 on hit is very comparable to a launch in terms of damage. On top of that, forward forward 1 deals 8 chip damage on block without heat. And, whereas 1+2 is -9 on block, forward forward 1 is +5 on block. +5 on block means anything 14 frames or faster is a true frame trap, like 3 or down back 1. And back 4 is a 15 frame counter hit launcher that'll trade with jabs, but you'll still be able to convert for a full launch. The best thing about forward forward 1 as a power mid is if the other player respects your forward forward 1, you can even convert that hesitation into another power play. Forward forward 1 is generally my power mid of choice, but you do need to consider that it's quite a bit slower than 1+2, especially since it comes from a dash input, so there's more time for you to get stuffed or counter hit. The whiff animation is out of this world too, and all but guarantees that you'll be launched by any player who manages to sidestep its incredibly linear hitbox. This means that when you use forward forward 1, you have to be certain that the other player isn't going to do anything to contest it. I've also been told before that some players are able to react to the 23 frame animation to differentiate it from down 1+2, but I'm not sure how likely you really are to encounter a player that can do that. Much like with reacting to down 1+2, it's technically possible but extremely difficult and unlikely. 1+2 and forward forward 1 are both good power mids and have their benefits and drawbacks. I tend to rely on forward forward 1, and that's just because I tend to value options that give me continuation. Forward forward 1 allows me to apply mix-ups without giving up my momentum. Even then though, 1+2 is super fast and reliable, and there's no risk to throwing it out willy-nilly because it's safe on block. You should go with whatever feels right to you for the situation. There is one more way you can apply a power mix-up, and that's with Destabilizer. Destabilizer is a bit of an unsung hero of Asuka's offense in Tekken 8, and I think it has quite a bit of potential that a lot of players haven't tapped into yet. When I'm going for a power mix, I tend to rely on Destabilizer more than I rely on the 1+2 and down 1+2 50-50. Forward forward 1 is also an amazing complement to Destabilizer too. Or Destabilizer as well, I should say. Just in case you aren't initiated, Destabilizer is an unbreakable throw that leads into a canned mix-up between Destabilizer 2, a safe on block mid-heat engager, and Destabilizer 4, a knockdown low that guarantees forward 2 on hit for 35 damage. Destabilizer, which I'll call D-Stab from now on just for brevity, is really slow and linear. The range isn't much better than your normal power mix, and the reward isn't as good, but it has a lot of other benefits that set it apart from your other standard power mix options. 1. It has a chunky hitbox, which makes it connect much more reliably than down 1+2, despite having about the same range. 2. D-Stab 2 is the fastest way to apply chip damage without heat. 3. D-Stab 4 deals about the same damage as down 1+2, while only being -14 on block, which isn't launch punishable by most characters, meaning the canned mix-up overall is significantly less risky than 1+2 versus down 1+2. And 4, its property as a throw allows D-Stab to break through Power Crush attacks, which is a really handy trait that's surprisingly helpful for rounding out Asuka's offense in matches. In practice, D-Stab can be really tricky to connect on the fly, since it's an 18 frame high with poor reach and not a lick of tracking. If you were ever wondering when to use D-Stab so that it'll actually hit, 1-1, back 2-1, and forward forward 1 are your answer. Against any character, even if they backdash, with the exception of forward forward 1 connecting on block at tip range, Destabilizer will always reach after these moves on block and force the other player into a 50-50. Definitely give this a shot in matches. For example, get the other player to anticipate the third hit of 1-1-3, and then when they start respecting 1-1, hit them with the Destabilizer. This'll get you Tekken King for free. Now, you can consider D-Stab to be a canned 50-50, and I think this works fine given that both options have uniquely good frame data. D-Stab 2 is a high reward mid that's only -3 on block, and D-Stab 4 is only -14, so even if the low gets blocked, you aren't losing half of your life bar in most cases. That risk-reward ratio might be worth it to you. In my opinion though, the way you ought to apply D-Stab is to default to D-Stab 2 a majority of the time. This is because the nature of D-Stab as a canned mix-up means that it lacks ambiguity. The other player will always know to expect the mix-up after they get hit by the grab, and you can't delay either option significantly enough to use timing as a layer in your mix-up. In contrast, when you run up and apply a standard power mix with 1+2 versus down 1+2, the other player can't necessarily be certain that you're going to go for that 50-50, and they can't be certain with what timing you'll commit to either option either. This is why you'll see a lot of players get hit by down 1+2 over and over again. It's just really difficult to get a read on if you're mixing it up well. You have to leverage a different kind of ambiguity with Destabilizer. By defaulting to the 2 option most of the time, you can consistently benefit from its 6 chip damage on block, and leverage its -3 frames on block to set up sidesteps, parries, and power crushes, or gamble on taking your turn back with something like a jab or a high crushing attack. If you're smart about how you use those frames, you can even get the other player to respect D-Stab 2 on block, which is really handy and frustrating for them. You can start cashing out with D-Stab 4 for extra damage once the other player has learned to expect the D-Stab 2. This might seem like a bit of a headache, but it's pretty reasonable once you get used to applying D-Stab after 4-4-1 and 1-1 on block and whatnot. If I'm being honest though, None of what I just explained is really all that important, because the real reason that you should default to D-Stab 2 most of the time is because players will, with alarming frequency, get hit by D-Stab 2 for free without any conditioning. Players really don't want to get hit by D-Stab 4, and will assume a lot of the time that if you're going through the trouble of connecting a Destabilizer, that you'll be going for the medium risk, high reward low. It's a primal instinct that you can insidiously take advantage of by spamming D-Stab 2 in a sort of incidental no mix-up, where you're always dealing damage without taking very much risk. By the way, in terms of the D-Stab 4 knockdown, if you remember earlier, I mentioned that after down 1+2 on hit, you can gamble for extra damage by doing a sort of Oki mix-up, and this exact mix-up also works after D-Stab 4. So if you do D-Stab 4, forward 3 will hit the other player if they try to get up off the ground, and if they stay on the ground, or side roll, then forward 3+4 will hit for extra damage. That was a bit of a long-winded breakdown of Destabilizer, but I think it's worth using, so I hope some of the info I just provided here helps you apply it and explore it more in matches. I think it helps a lot to round out Asuka's weaknesses when it comes to mixing up patient players, and it's just a really interesting and fun tool to have. That's it for the breakdown on power mix-ups, so here's a hyper-condensed recap. 1. Your main power mix-up is 1+2 as your power mid, and down 1+2 as your power low. If you're just starting out, this is where you should start. 2. Forward 1 is a strong alternative power mid that's also plus on block and deals chip damage. It's slower to use than 1+2, but better for continuing your offense. 3. Destabilizer is really good as a lighter power mix, and you can apply it easily after forward 1, after 1-1, or after back 2-1 on block. I didn't mention this earlier, but 1+4 is also really good for setting up the right spacing for Destabilizer, which is handy because 1+4 is a really quick 14 frame move with surprisingly long reach for its speed. Now we're going to talk about wall push. If you have awareness of the stage and you have the opportunity to go for a power play, it can be a good idea to forego the immediate damage reward of a power mix-up in favor of stringing together high pushback attacks to push the other player into the wall. Wall game specifically is something I'll go over in another video, but just take my word for it when I say that having the other player's back to the wall is a massive advantage state that's worth the trouble. If you know that there's a wall nearby behind the other player, instead of going for a power mix-up, try using while running 1+2 and while running 3. These moves cover each other's weaknesses and can be used interchangeably, and they both have a ton of travel and pushback on block. As you play more and gain stage awareness and familiarity with the pushback of these moves, you'll learn when the right time to go for wall push is. If you can push to the wall by making the other player block 1 to 3 of these moves in a row, then wall push is a good idea. That's just the right amount that you're pretty likely to push them into that disadvantaged state before they can tell what's going on. Even if you can't reach the wall though, just getting closer to the wall can still be useful. Having the other player's back close to the wall can compel them to spend more of their time trying to step for a better position, which you can take advantage of with homing moves and stuff. And you can always push them the rest of the way there just with more wall push or even basic string pressure. While running 1+2 and while running 3 are like two peas in a pod. Running 1+2 is a +4 on block homing high, and running 3 is a +3 on block linear mid. The other player is disincentivized from trying to step or duck these moves on a read, since running 1+2 will hit them if they step, and running 3 will hit them if they crouch. If they try to interrupt you with active defense, you can toss out a down forward 1 on occasion to deter buttons. Down forward 1 is a frame trap after while running 1+2, and will interrupt most attacks after while running 3. If the other player presses and gets clipped by down forward 1, your advantage on hit is almost always enough to get them to respect you, which is a great opportunity to keep swinging with your wall push. Down forward 1 will whiff if the other player backdashes, depending on the character they're using. Asuka has a really bad backdash, so she can't backdash it, but I think most characters can, especially if you hit it at tip range. But they will still tend to respect the down forward 1 in any case, because its extensions are really scary, so you could still have the mental advantage to continue your wall push. If you want a higher reward mid-check, down forward 2 and back 4 can work as stronger alternatives to counter at launch the other player if they press slower buttons in response to your wall push. Both of these attacks can whiff if the other player backdashes, depending on the character they're using, but down forward 2 is really difficult to whiff punish on reaction, and back 4 has string extensions that you can use to make the other player second guess if it's safe to whiff punish you. If you can use back 4's extensions to cause the other player to hesitate, you could even continue your offense after tossing it out. Both of these moves are solid higher risk, higher reward options alongside your down forward 1 poke. While running 1+2 and while running 3 can be option selected with a sidestep into crouch, but from my experience you aren't likely to see this. If this does become an issue, you can beat it with forward 3, which is a homing mid. Forward 3 is -9 on block, so you'll most likely have to play defense afterwards if it gets blocked. But it's a foolproof answer to sidestep crouch during your wall push, and it'll also beat out sidestep attacks and other really slow attacks. The main other thing you'll have to look out for is power crush. I will say that I also don't tend to see players power crush as an answer to my wall push, but I think they should, and they might eventually figure it out in the future, so I'm gonna cover it here. And I have Dragunov to help us out because he has a better backdash than Asuka does. Power crush is a bit of a blind spot in Asuka's wall push, since both while running 1+2 and while running 3 have too much pushback for throws or can-cans to connect reliably if the other player backdashes. At least when you don't have gusto for while running 1+2, then it's a little bit different. You don't have many options that can beat a power crush without also being death on whiff if the other player backdashes. What you can do as a foolproof way to option select between power crush and backdash is to use down 4. Down 4 also has the benefit of tracking sidesteps really well. This has a really low reward, but stopping a power crush in its tracks is good, and the 6 damage from down 4 will add up alongside your while running 1+2s and while running 3s. -4 on hit also isn't too shabby. Asuka can work with that pretty well for her full crouch game. You can also do down 3 for a little bit of extra damage, but it doesn't have the same tracking and it's -6 on hit. Another thing I think you can do if you're really sharp is dash into a throw. I tested this against Dragunov and Elisa's backdashes, and against Asuka's 15-frame power crush, and I think that if you can execute a really clean buffer dash into a throw, you should be able to reach a backdash and interrupt the power crush pretty reliably. If you use a generic throw, you can even track sidesteps. My favorite is 2+4, because after this, down 4 is guaranteed for a bit of extra damage if the other player tries to stand up, and the frames and spacing are pretty good on break too. Aside from all that, against characters with a slower power crush, such as Elisa or Dragunov, you can actually hit the armor with a down forward 1, and still have time to block after. I wouldn't discount just blocking though. If you're up against a character with a power crush that can be punished on block, like Dragunov, then you'll come out on top if you just hold back on a read. In any case, You always at least have massive frame advantage if you block a power crush, so you can try to take your turn back. I would only really recommend trying to beat out a power crush with these down 4 and dash throw tactics if you're having a hard time anticipating if the other player will power crush or not. The last thing worth mentioning about wall push is that while running 1+2 and while running 3 are two of Asuka's best ways to deal chip damage. While running 1+2 without Gusto deals 6 chip damage on block, and while running 3 deals 9 chip damage. It's nothing super duper crazy, but if you're applying wall push well, it can add up pretty quickly alongside other chunks of big damage from canned string mix-ups and stuff. This is really cool since it means that even while you're pushing to the wall, you're still dealing some damage. The chip damage is also why wall push can still be useful even if you aren't pushing to the wall. You can just apply these principles as a rushdown strat that forces the other player to do something about the chip damage eventually, which is in your favor since you're plus on block and you have options to counter most of the other player's options. Even if the other player respects you, you can decide to run in for a power mix-up instead. I usually still reserve this approach for specifically pushing to the wall, rather than full-on Unga rushdown, because I think Asuka has faster and easier ways to turn respect into damage. But it's one of the many tools in Asuka's wild big Tekken offense. With all that said, wall push is a bit more complicated than power mix-ups, but I'll do my best to recap. 1. While running 1+2 and while running 3 are your spammy pushback options. When a wall is within reach, think about getting the other player to block these attacks so that you can push them there. These moves are plus on block, so the other player is likely to respect you. 2. If you're trying to figure out the right time to go for wall push, I find 1 to 3 reps of your wall push options is a decent rule of thumb. The faster you can get to the wall, the better, but if the wall is too far away, I tend to go for a different power play instead. 3. Down forward 1 is your easy button check. Periodically tossing out down forward 1 in between your wall push options will help make sure the other player is respecting your wall push. Down forward 2 and back 4 are alternatives that will counter-hit launch slower buttons. Down forward 1 is my default because it's fast and safe on whiff. 4. Forward 3 is an easy check against someone who's using sidestep crouch to option select your wall push. This isn't common, but it's a good thing to keep in mind. 5. Down 4 and dash throw will beat power crush while also accounting for sidesteps and backdashes, assuming you're using a homing throw. Blocking against power crush is also advised. Power crush also isn't very common, but it's still a good thing to keep in mind. 6. Wall push does a lot of chip damage, so it can even be useful for the chip damage alone if that's your thing. The last major quote-unquote power play I want to talk about is the concept of key charge strats. Now, before you think I'm crazy, I want to preface this by saying that power mix-ups and wall push are totally sufficient and sensible power plays, and your focus should really be on applying those because they actually make sense and aren't super risky and finicky. Key charge strats are more theory than strat, at least for now. I think it's worth mentioning though, in case anyone watching this video is open to experimenting with it and might be interested in my findings. If you're uninitiated on key charge, by pressing 1+2 plus 3 plus 4 all at the same time, you'll perform a key charge animation that's about 1 second long, and for the next 4 seconds after, you won't be able to block, and any attack that hits you will land as a counter hit by default. But any attack you land on it is also a guaranteed counter hit. Asuka is a defensive counterplay character with a lot of really nutty counter-hit tools, so even though you can't block, if you're really smart about it, you can scrape together all of your defensive tools and land that nutty counter-hit before you get launched yourself. The way I've found that key charge could be seriously applied in Tekken 8 is to look out for a situation where you're able to create enough space to activate it without getting launch punished right away. Then, find a way to close that space and actually land your free counter hit. Finding that space is the easy part, but actually putting the key charge to work is something I'm still figuring out. Basically, when the other player hesitates, you have the opportunity to create space to allow you to key charge safely. Enough spacing will make it so that it's impossible for the other player to launch your key charge before you're able to move and press buttons. Whenever the other player respects you after something on block, you can do a backflip by inputting back, up, back, back to create enough spacing for key charge. In certain situations where you do a move with decent pushback, a single backdash will also suffice to get you good enough spacing for a safe key charge, if the other player also backdashes on block. A couple of examples of moves that have this kind of pushback would be down 2 and down back 3. These are moves where typically if you connect them and you backdash, if the other player doesn't attack, it'll usually whiff and you can whiff punish with forward 2. But if the other player also backdashes on block, then if you backdash 2, that'll create enough space for you to do a safe key charge. A couple other good examples of moves that have this kind of pushback would be forward forward 4 or up forward 2. If the other player approaches you quickly as you're activating your key charge, for example, you didn't expect them to disrespect your spacing, you can try to salvage the situation by confirming the ultimate tackle to interrupt a sloppy rushdown. This works because you can delay the 1+2 input for the tackle quite a ways during the key charge animation. If you backflip to create space, and the other player is chasing you down during your backflip, you can confirm the backflip 3 to try to beat or dissuade a sloppy rushdown in this case as well. When you achieve a key charge, the big challenge is getting back in to use it. If you still have a good distance, just playing keep out might be good enough to get the other player to hesitate, which can give you the opportunity to approach. I have a whole video on Asuka's keep out theory, so check that out if you want to know more. When I'm testing the waters with key charge in a match, I'm usually not too shy about just keeping my distance and stalling out the key charge timer. You get a lot of good information during these situations in terms of how the other player responds to key charge. If you find yourself up close, you can also safely dump the key charge with a down 4 if things are getting too spicy and you aren't too concerned with making the key charge count for something. Ideally, you don't have to do any of this stuff, and you can just convert that hard-earned key charge into damage without having to play passive and waste a bunch of time. That's the tricky part of the non-Oki key charge power play that I'm still trying to work out. The other player's typical responses after you key charge will either be to stare you down like a deer in headlights, or throw out some random nonsense in the hopes it'll hit you. Keep out can hopefully help you with the latter, but you may need to set up the situation a few times to understand the other player's timing and particular habits, or just give up on key charge strats altogether and go for a more reliable power play. If the other player does respect you though, enough to let you approach them without contest, it's open season to blow them up with a free counter hit. So far, I find that the best way to apply Asuka's key charge state is to focus on her full crouch game. The reason being that full crouch allows you to evade highs and low parry lows, which counters a lot of basic checks and common counter hit lows. Running straight up and trying to launch the other player with down 3+4 can-cans or down back 4-3 is super duper risky and usually ends up badly. But entering full crouch in the other player's face and playing around full crouch down forward 2 is way less risky and way more reliable with its solid reach and tracking. I would generally approach just by sprinting in or by using a forward 2 cancel, but I've also toyed with using full crouch 3+4 as an approach tool, since the worst that'll happen if your approach gets stuffed is that you get caught in a float combo rather than a full launch. Full crouch 3+4 also has the strong knockdown extension that can deter the other player from pressing after, and you can even recover in the full crouch. I haven't had much of a chance to test this out though. I haven't really gotten to the point where I would be string pressuring people into key charge specific power mix-ups, but that's the ultimate application of key charge strats in theory. Imagine someone respecting 1-1 and you mix them up with back 4 versus down 3+4. Both full launches if they hit. Your throws also become counter hit throws by default, even falling rain, so they're harder to break. I think that sounds pretty badass. If you have your heat activated while you're key charge, Heat Smash is an amazing way to set up that nasty back 4 versus down 3+4 50-50. It has super nutty range and it's plus 10 on block, so the other player just has to hold the mix. There's nothing they can do to move away from it. Usually the other player will just get launched by down 3+4, seeing as though they have to pick their poison, and a lot of players don't know to expect this mix-up since it's still a pretty niche strat. This is a super duper cheap and cheesy way to apply key charge strats, and I might explore the idea of doing this in matches more as a serious play when I have Heat Smash available. In terms of defense during key charge, I think it's worth stressing how much it matters that you can still crouch and low parry. Even if you can't block, you can still limit a lot of moves the other player can throw at you just by holding down forward. No highs can hit you when you're in crouch, and parryable lows will get parried for a combo. It's not like you can stand block anyways, and Asuka has a really robust moveset from crouch, so you only really benefit from doing this. Beyond that, it's worth remembering that Asuka also has reversal, she has Sabakis, and she has a power crush that's -9 on block. Although it doesn't mean much during key charge that Asuka's power crush is safe on block, you can still use reversal and other defensive tricks to try to avoid getting launched if it doesn't hit. Alternatively, if you haven't activated your heat, you have access to Heat Burst, which is a godlike mid-power crush that's +1 on block. The point is that Asuka doesn't have a shortage of defensive tools, even if she can't block during key charge. They're obviously no replacement for just being able to hold back and block, but at the very least, being able to crouch, low parry, and armor through attacks should be really helpful for enforcing key charge in theory. That's all I've got to say on key charge for now, since I'm still working out the kinks of key charge strats and trying to figure out how to make it work in Tekken 8. I do think it has potential, and I mention key charge as a power play because I think it's pretty congruent with how Asuka takes advantage of the other player's hesitation to create situations and play really big Unga Tekken. Not to mention, treating it as a power play is the best way you can pop a key charge on demand in a decently safe way. I generally recommend you just rely on power mix and wall push for your power plays, since key charge is pretty unnecessarily risky. But who knows, maybe if we keep trying it in matches, the more we get blown up, the more we'll learn how to make it work. That's how I tend to approach new and wacky ideas like this. Hopefully one day I can make a power play addendum or an exclusive video just to expand on key charge strats. I don't have much that I can say with certainty, but here's a recap of the things that I know for sure. 1. Key charge strats are cool because you can land funny counter hits for free. 2. You can activate key charge safely by creating space when you know the other player will respect you. You can always create enough space with a backflip, but if you know that the other player will backdash after certain moves with a lot of pushback, just doing a backdash of your own will work too. 3. If you're testing the waters and trying to see how the other player reacts, there's no shame in stalling out the key charge timer or dumping key charge on a down 4 poke. 4. Focusing on full crouch game and using full crouch down 4-2 as your counter hit attack of choice seems to be the safest and most reliable way to apply Key Charge, because it maximizes defensive ability, because you can crush highs and low parry lows, and full crouch down forward 2 is a very high reward and reliable counter hit low. 5. Power Crush and Peep Burst, as well as Asuka's other defensive tools, will most likely be a godsend for more complex and explosive applications of Key Charge strats, like applying Key Charge specific power mixes and counter hit throws. 6. Heat Smash gives you a free way to force the Key Charge power mix between back 4 and down 3+4. And that's it. In terms of power mix-up and wall push, I think power plays are generally pretty simple to understand. It's obviously really important to know what your options are when you're up against a smart player who knows how to hold back against Asuka, and beyond even that, I find just knowing your power plays and when to go for them will add a lot of direction to your gameplay. I'm already cooking some ideas for a Power Plays addendum video, but for now I think this video is pretty thorough. That Key Charge stuff isn't super battle tested by myself or most other Asuka players for that matter, but you know, there's a reason I call these videos Asuka Theory and not Asuka Law. I think this stuff has potential and warrants exploration, even if it sounds kinda silly right now. As usual, if you want to talk theory with me or any other Asuka OGs, hit up that link to the Asuka Discord in the description. Speaking of OGs, I want to thank you folks who are commenting on these videos and showing appreciation and stuff. I've even seen 1 or 2 people in the wild who have gotten some sauce from my vids, and I'm absolutely over the moon for that. It's been super motivating. I'm really hoping these videos keep picking up like they have been, because I love the shit out of this character, and I want to empower other Asuka players with the Discord tech that you would never find anywhere else without asking the right questions. I'm hoping that I can motivate other people to dig into Asuka as much as I have. Half of these videos are already about Oki, but I'm gradually cooking more interesting Asuka theory videos as I continue obsessively poring over this character. Anyways, I'll see you next time. Bye!